Welcome to the Connecting Greeks podcast. We're connecting the Greek community all over the world through media, technology, and love for our culture.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. We have such a great episode today. We have a very, very interesting, very, very amazing guest. His name is Christos Perakis. He has done a lot of stuff that I have only dreamt about. We talked to him, we got to know him, his accomplishments, and what the Greek culture means to him. A truly amazing person. Please join us as we get to know Christos Perakis.
Welcome, everyone, and welcome to the Connecting Greeks podcast. I'm your host, Fotis Stamos, and with me, my co-host, Ari Kalos.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
And as always, our podcast here is to bring interesting Greek guests from around the world. And with us today, not just a dear friend, but a very special guest. We have with us Christos Perakis, who is the CEO and founder of Zoodle, and amongst other things that we'll discuss very shortly.
And I want to jump in, and we definitely have to discuss that name. I want to know where you came up with it, but we'll get to that after. Go ahead, Foti, sorry.
Yes, Christos, and welcome to the segment.
Hey, kalimera, kalispera,
Yes, and as a Greek podcast, we can bounce back and forth Greek and English. We have that ability here.
Awesome, great.
But thank you so much, and Christos, we've kind of bumped into each other over the last couple of years, and one of the most fascinating things about yourself that we'll discuss, besides that you were an Apple executive, is that 2 years ago I was flying to Greece with the family, and I just arrived to the airport. I got off the plane. We got into baggage claim, took my phone out, turned my phone on. I was trying to get Wi-Fi, and then I see the Zoodle sign, and I'm like, wait, I know this.
I know that guy.
It was like an amazing moment for me, because my wife's like, "What's wrong with you?" I go, "This is Christos Perakis' thing," and she's like, "I think you haven't slept for 2 days." But yeah.
I love when I get messages from old coworker friends that, hey, I was just at a hotel in Hawaii or in Rhodos, and we saw Zoodle, and it's like I got so excited I had to send you a text message.
Yeah. The little things.
So we definitely have to address that, but let's jump back a little bit. Let's get a little bit of a history, because from everything I know about you, Christos, pretty fascinating and impressive, to say the least. A resume you have, but let's start from kind of early on.
So listen, you guys are gonna have to cut me short, because I love to talk a lot. But so my parents are both from the island of Paros. They came here in the. I have two sisters, 13 and 14 years older. So I basically had three mothers growing up. So I grew up in Newport, Rhode Island.
What brought your parents to Newport?
One of my, huge family. So my father had 8 brothers and sisters. My mother had 7 brothers and sisters.
Whoa.
Basically, one of my uncles was in the Merchant Marine and met a Greek American from Newport. She was originally from Skathos, and they got married, and he was living here, and he invited them. I think at the time, whatever you needed, $10 or whatever in your pocket. Right. So they came, and completely uneducated. My dad was born in 31, my mother in 34. So obviously all the schools were closed when they were growing up by the Germans. So, they were uneducated. Right. So he did what, most uneducated hard workers do. And, and he worked in a restaurant. He did construction. Right. So he was a provider, and, on his spare time, he'd either volunteer for the church or he'd go fishing. I mean, those are the only 2 things he ever did. Right. So, and, he taught me, his number one lesson was, I don't want you to work with your hand, right? I'm working well, my hands, my butt, my feet, because I want you to work, with your brain.
It's a familiar story for us.
Very familiar.
Yeah. So, they, when I went to college, I went to the University of Rhode Island. As soon as I went to college, they went back to Greece. So, my dad, my parents, I think, are one of the few, I guess it definitely not in the majority, right? So they're the minority of people that did what they said they were going to do. They came to the U.S., they made money, and they went back,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So he built a summer house in Paros. He had his own vineyard. He made his own wine. He made his own tipuro. He had
Good for him.
amazing garden. And both my sisters actually coincidentally married men from Paros, so the whole family basically was there. I'd vacation, and every summer I'd go to Paros, and I actually met at that time my wife. So my wife was actually a Greek from Athens. Being the analytical, computer sales guy that I was, we did a whole T-chart SWOT analysis of where we're going to live, pros and cons and strength, weakness,
so cool.
opportunity. Yeah. and ultimately, we agreed that, she'd come to the U.S. And coincidentally at that time, it was actually, to me, it was almost a trifecta, because at the same time I actually had just taken my first job at Apple. So Apple, again, I'm a sales and marketing guy, even though it's been tech and I can talk the talk, I'm really a sales and marketing. So that is so I started working at Apple right when Steve Jobs came back to Apple. So, I went from Apple almost being bankrupt to Apple being one of the most, valuable companies in the world.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the pre, I guess, the entry into Apple. Then, we, again, we can go back and forth. I mean, tons of great stories growing up in Newport, right? I mean, just amazing Greek community there. And some of my, dearest and oldest friends are from there, but I figure we got to, keep the people moving in a certain direction. We got to buck the trend, right? We got to show Greeks that Greeks can be organized and talk about things in linear fashion.
That's entertaining.
When my wife at the time was pregnant with my son, I actually we started thinking about, okay, where do we want to raise him? And we kind of thought about it and said, okay, listen, her whole family was in Greece, my whole family was. Let's see if somehow I can get a job in Greece with Apple. And I was lucky. I was more lucky than I was skilled at Apple. I was fairly successful. So every year I'd get invited to an event where Steve Jobs would present, right? So it'd be a kickoff event talking about the year. And every year at the end of his speech, you could ask Steve a question, right? And that was an amazing opportunity. But you always needed to be careful, right? Because if you said the wrong thing, that was the last thing you said at Apple.
Okay.
Right? The saying was, you can say anything you want at Apple on your last day. So I basically had prepped an entire analysis. And I basically wanted to ask the question to Steve, right? When, what does it take for us to open an office in Greece? Like, my goal was, hey, let me move to Greece, open an Apple office there. That's my goal, right? Mm-hmm. So I did this analysis. And at the time, it's been, probably 15 years, 20 years since I thought about this. But let's say at the time the population was 11 million people. So I said, listen, I was prepping Steve, 11 million people, 16 million cell phone, right? Internet penetration is growing from 20 to 45%. Disposable income is X, right? So I had all these metrics, right? And I had practiced, guys, even the pause, right? Because that's what you had to do, right?
Wow.
I spitballed this. I practiced with my coworkers, like, what if his counter question is this? What if he asks you this? So you needed to be ready because, hey, if you're saying you want to open an office, you got to show that, hey, you could be that person that's going to run it, right?
Right.
So Steve's at this presentation. He does his, amazing speech. Everyone's pumped up, and it's time for the Q&A session. So I run to the microphone. And somebody beats me. So I'm number 2. There's 15 people in line. I'm number 2. So there's a guy, and he's like, hello, Steve. I'm from South Korea. We have 27 million people and 75 million cell phones.
Oh, no.
We are the first country in the world to have 100% Wi-Fi coverage. So everything that he said was 10 times bigger than what I was going to say about Greece, right?
Oh, boy.
So Steve, makes a little joke and says, hey, contrary to popular belief, I don't make all the decisions. And, kind of does a little ha, ha, ha. But he goes on and says, hey, listen, you know what? Those are all great reasons to want to open an office there. But there's another reason I want to open an office there. I'm sick and tired of those guys attacking our turf. So going back in history, this is before iPhone. This is iPod. So the number one revenue source for Apple was iPod, and the number one competitor for Apple was Creative, and they were out of South Korea. So he wanted to target them there. He said, but guys, we don't have an office in Russia. We don't have an office in China. We don't have an office in these enormous countries. And to open an office, it costs $7.5 million because it's not just legal framework. You got to hire people. You got to have lawyers. You got to have inventory. If you're going to open up a country, you need to retail stores. You need to do all this stuff. So we need to stack rank. And as he's going through all this, I go, okay, you know what? I sit down. I'm not going to ask the question, right? I mean, So that was my first opportunity to speak to Steve after having about 7.
Yep.
Fast forward, very next, we're doing the largest, I think today it still might be the largest single purchase order deal ever in the history of Apple. It was a $36 million order for the state of Maine. Every child got a laptop. Basically, you'd go in with the laptop, you open up the laptop, your homework was automatically uploaded, your new coursework was down. I mean, it really made a lot of changes to education. It created this huge change where before, like you go to school and you do your schoolwork and you go to home and you do your homework, right? But what they found was that was silly because you can actually be at home, watch the lesson, right? Watch the podcast, right? Watch all this stuff. And then when you're at school, that's when you can ask your questions. You're asking the teacher the questions instead of your parents that don't know the answer. So completely flip this. So it's some amazing, amazing results. We can talk about that. That could be a whole other podcast on that deal. I mean, it completely changed anyway. So I remember at the time, actually, the VP of Apple Education was a Greek guy, Jim Marshall, right? I know it doesn't sound
right.
And sorry, a lot of anecdotal stuff, right? But his great-grandfather used to be one of the, I can't remember what they're called, kleftis, that actually went with Kolokotroni. So he actually has a tufeki. And maybe this isn't politically correct to say, but it actually has notches from every Turk that they encounter, let's put it that way. Right? So, and I've held this thing. It's pretty cool. Anyway, so Jim asked me, he said, hey, Christo, go to the airport because Steve's coming. And, the governor's going to be there, the commissioner of education. I want you to be there, but just in case he brings an entourage, because if it's just Steve, he's going to go with the governor, right? But if he brings, the engineers and PR people, we might need another car to take some people, right? So, I show up there and, Steve comes off his little private airplane. He's alone. So I get the little nod from the VP to go back to convention presentation. So as I'm walking my car, right? I mean, guys, I still say this and hair sticks up. Right? I feel a presence getting closer. Right? This is the stuff that, you don't believe until it happens to you, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I feel him. And I look to my right diagonally and it's Steve coming behind me. And I'm not thinking, right? And he goes, what did you want to ask? And I go, oh no, Steve, I'm just here in case you brought other people. He goes, no, last year, sales conference. You wanted to ask a question and you sat down. And I'm going, oh my God, right? So I said, well, you know how you had the gentleman from South Korea? He goes, yeah. Da, 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 da. I said, well, I was going to ask a similar question about Greece, about opening an office in Greece. And he says, and you realize it would have been a stupid follow-up question, so you sat down. Smart move. And then he turns around. So that is my first official interaction with Steve Jobs. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So fast forward, I got called into Cupertino maybe about 6 months later, and it was amazing. They had actually mapped out my, I don't want to call it my entire career path, but it was basically the next 4 years. They basically, they outlined, they said, hey, you were born in Newport, but both your parents are Greek, and you're a Greek citizen, but you don't have a Greek passport. So because you're 34, in April, you're going to be 35, which means, so they spec this out. I basically went to Greece, transferred to Greece. I worked for 4 months, I guess. And then in August, I actually went into the Army. I did my basic training, vasiki ekpedevsi, right? So the law says if you're, again, it's probably changed since then, but the law said at the time, when you're 35, you can do your basic training, which is 6 weeks, and then you can pay the rest. Yeah. So I did basic training. Apple paid the rest, and basically got my Greek passport. And the reason they wanted me to have my Greek passport was, listen, if you work at Apple, you're smart. So everyone's smart. All thousands of people are, right? You need to be lucky. And in my case, you need to have a beard. So what they liked is they liked the fact that I could, coronavirus kind of helping here, right? I could grow my beard long or bushy. So if I wanted to go to the Middle East, right? Bushy. that kind of stuff. Because what they really wanted is they wanted that stack ranking that he was talking about. That, hey, we didn't have office in China, we didn't have one in Russia. Well, we didn't have anything in the Middle East. We didn't have. Listen, Greece has 11 million population. Turkey has 70 million, right? So he basically wanted somebody to be able to go to all these countries, be in-house, do an analysis of, security and currency fluctuation and, GDP and, whatever metrics, look at what the distribution model is, and then make a decision on whether or not stack rank what country they should open in. And he realized that, well, not just him, but his whole team, that, Israel is one of those countries. If you get an Israeli stamp in your passport, you're not getting, so basically I could have my Greek passport and my American passport. Eventually I actually got 2 American passports, depending on stuff like that. So I could go into different countries, stay for 2 months, 6 months, whatever it took, and do an analysis. So ultimately, while I was at Apple at the time, we opened up Abu Dhabi, a whole bunch of other stories. So I won't tell them all.
You gotta save them for the next segments.
Yeah, there you go. So we opened up Middle East. Then we opened up Constantinople. So that was the second office that we opened. We grew the business by doing those changes from 220 million to about 2.2 billion within 3 years. That's an amazing, success story. And when we were getting ready to open Tel Aviv, and my son, who at the time was 8. We had some specialists take a look at him, and we realized that he actually had something called PDD-NOS, which is a high-functioning autism, right? So most people that talk to him wouldn't pick this up, right? But that's primarily because my ex-wife now did an amazing job, taking care of speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, everything he needed, he got, right? So ultimately now most people can't see that he has any issues other than he talks like his father. But ultimately, the specialist at the time said, hey, listen, he's brilliant, but if you really want him to succeed, you really need to get him back to, right? There's the education system, especially for special needs, is really good. And, we kind of looked at, okay, where is that going to take us? And, the best school systems were in the Northeast. And we kind of looked at that and said, okay, but that kind of takes me out of the whole Apple equation, because, there's really nothing of that. Apple is Cupertino or any of the regional offices, London or Middle East, something like that. So I guess maybe we have to fill in some blanks. Greece was one of the countries I managed. So I really got involved in the Greek startup ecosystem there. Started doing some angel investing. I did some mentorship. Greece was at the time very, very far behind with venture capital. I was blessed, working at Apple and having shares. I was able to actually invest in some of the very first venture capitals in Greece. So, in Greece, we've had a lot of success stories. So for you probably, going there, you probably took Taxi Beat, right, to get a taxi, right? So that was, one of the investments made by the Open Fund. Wow. And since then, there's been a lot of success. So we can talk about that, I guess, maybe on the third part, the post Apple part, right? But, in that phase, I kind of said, hey, listen, you know what? I really like this company that came in that presented to the team. But the team kind of said, Christo, there's 2 tech people that really have this great idea, but they don't have any sales background, right? You should really talk to them. And they really don't have a marketing background either. So you should really talk to them. We're not going to invest them as a fund, but, maybe you might want to do it as an investment. And, the first thing I look at when I look at their presentation, the name guys, I cringed, right? Because, it's a name that sounds really, really good in Greek, right? If you don't have any experience in the United States. So it was called Piwi. So it sounds good. Piwi. It sounds French, right? Okay. But, being a Greek American, I'm like, oh, Pee-wee. So 2 different ways of saying urine, right? You got Pee-wee Herman, right? So you got a pedophile in the name. I'm like, okay, well, this doesn't work. All right, but let's talk about the technology. What does it do? So honestly, the idea was really simple at the time, and it was, hey, how many times do you go to bar or restaurant and you want to connect to the Wi-Fi, and you got to ask, File, ποιος είναι ο κωδικός, right? What's the code, right? And that's annoying for you, right? It's annoying for them, and in the end, they're not getting any value, right? They're paying for the internet, they're paying for the Wi-Fi, but they're not getting any value. So at the time, Facebook had actually released their API that allowed people to to integrate Facebook authentication. So it was really simple. Hey, you want to connect to Wi-Fi? Sure, just log in with your Facebook information. And then a couple of weeks after that, then Twitter came out with the same thing. So it was really simple. And while you're sitting there for the waiter to come, you don't have to wait to get the code. You can just log in with Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, or if you're in Russia, VK, or Asia, Weibo, or whatever. So you connect. And then ultimately, we're giving that data to the restaurant or the bar. So that's actually how we started. It was just a simple log into Wi-Fi, correct, take care of my need, which is I want to connect really fast. And then, in return, the bar restaurant's getting that information. We were lucky too. The two tech guys saw the limitation. I wasn't ready to leave Apple at the time. I still was, on the cusp. I needed some options anyway. So I said, okay, let me think about this. So Apple at the time was eating Nokia's lunch, right? That's where Apple was really growing. I had a friend that was in line to take over Nokia, but the number one guy at Nokia was a Greek guy, in charge of sales for Southern Europe, and he wasn't sure if he wanted the job or if he was gonna, which meant he'd have to move to Sofia, right, and his family, or not. So my friend kind of said, hey, listen, I've got this thing. If my boss takes the job, then I'm out of a job. If he doesn't take the job, then I'm going to be the new director. I said, okay, what's his background? So he's an operations guy. To be great. I need somebody. If I can get somebody like this caliber to run Zoodle for a year until I'm ready to come on board. So we actually, we talked, and we coincidentally, I was at a business meeting in Cyprus. So was he. We were at the Hilton, had a cigar, and within a cigar and two drinks, we basically hashed out that he was going to join, and it was a great feeling. The second great feeling was actually almost a heart attack. He called me about 2 weeks later, and he said, the original deal was sweat equity, right? He's going to work, and then he's going to get a percentage of the company. He calls 2 weeks later, and he says, I want to renegotiate. Oh. That was my heart attack. And it's one of those things like, oh man, I don't want to have this discussion. But basically he said, I love this so much. I want to put money in and I want to get a bigger percentage. Right? So that was just a great feeling. The easy stuff. I mean, honestly, I am blessed that I have co-founders that, we I guess the lucky thing is we weren't friends before. Right, so we don't have any of that baggage where you're worried about saying the wrong thing, ruining your friendship. Right, never take money from friends and family, that kind of stuff. Right, and we've had tough discussions, right, over the year. But we've always been able to handle it. I actually became the godfather of the children of one of my co-founders. Right, so we've actually, even negotiating, percentages, and hey, now whatever it is, 5 years later, I'm working more hours and whatever. Do we renegotiate percentages? All that stuff, we've hashed that out fairly easily. Going back to one of your original questions that you wanted to have, probably the hardest discussion we ever had that took us 3 weeks was the name. Like Zoodle, like so for me, I was at Apple and I'm like, okay, it's got to be something simple. It's got to be 2 syllables. It's got to be, nobody else has to have the URL, so we started looking, and I remember, I don't know if you guys have run into Peter Economidis, really great marketing, guru. We had some overlap at Apple. So I remember having dinner with him, and I was hashing out some names, for him, and I'm like, I had stupid things like, what about, again, I was thinking URL, like it's got to be available, right? And I'm like, Firefly Wi-Fi or whatever, he did everything in his power not to reach over the table to smack me. I was like, what do you think? Simplify. So literally we sat through GoDaddy and just looked at every available 2-syllable word. Uh-huh. And ultimately there was no word that meant anything, right? But Zoodle didn't mean anything. And I looked at it and said, what was an iPod? It didn't mean anything. Apple made it into. So I'm like, if we could actually find this word, this name, and make it into something nobody else knows what it means, and
just like Google,
it doesn't matter. Yeah. So ultimately, it took us a long time to negotiate because they weren't crazy about it. So I've had to eat crow over the years because there is also, I'd say, the number one concern with the name is Zoodle. About 30% of people spell it with 1 T instead of 2. So that's a common error. Again, a mistake I made. By the way, I'm not a typical I'm okay with saying I made a mistake.
I also wanted to just say, like, when I asked you that question originally, it's not because I didn't like the name. It's because what you just said, it didn't mean anything. And I'm fascinated by a lot of, like, back from the .com bubble and all these, like, names were coming out. So finding a word that doesn't mean anything, but it still fits and it still suits, and you could create the meaning. Like, that's what fascinated me by it. I just wondered, like, how it came about, and that's a pretty cool story.
So again, one of the mistakes I made before I left Apple. So I was getting ready to transition, right? But I actually found the person that owned the Zoodle with one T. He wasn't using it; it was just parked. And I sent him an email, right? And I said, I'm interested in purchasing. And unfortunately, he looked me up on LinkedIn and he saw that I was still, country manager Apple. So he's like, oh, he must be asking on behalf of Apple. So he asked for like $250,000 for this URL that value is probably $500, So anyway, still every year we reach out and every year we ask him, and every year his number comes down, but it's still, $50,000 for Zoodle with one T. Anyway. So came back to the U.S., opened up the office here. When we first started, we were lucky because, I was at Apple. Nasos, my co-founder, the COO, he was at Nokia. So we had great contacts. So our first customer was a brewery, Biraria, in Sidagma Square.
Oh, wow.
Right? Our second customer was IKEA.
Really?
Okay,
because we had those type of contacts, right? Then it was like, then the 3 through 10 was bars and restaurants, the easy picking. The number 5 was the Mall of Athens, right? Then 6 through 20, whatever bars, then it was the airport, right? So I came to the U.S. and, when I came to the U.S., I said, okay, listen, we're going to learn from all our mistakes, right? It's not necessarily mistakes that you make on purpose. It's just, it could be coincidence, right? So in Greece, unfortunately, almost nobody uses credit card. I guess, it was the case definitely before the crisis, and right? So everything is account payable, account receivable. Do you know how tedious it is to collect 50 or 100 or $200 a month from 300, 400 customers?
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, so we have a dedicated person that's doing that. And, so we had to learn and then what's preventing somebody from not paying for 3 weeks or a month or 3 months? So we adjusted the software that gives them a notification. Hey, if you haven't paid in 11 days, we'll notify them on the 11th day. If they haven't paid, we shut off the internet.
Yeah.
Right? Very quickly, people, connect again, right? But when I came to the U.S., I said, okay, no, we're not doing this. We're going to automate this. So in the U.S., every single customer, credit card, right? So 100 plus customers in the U.S., I don't have an account payable, account receivable person. I spend 15 minutes first of every month, right? Wow. So we've learned from those mistakes. I guess a thing that we've kind of, it's not a pivot. We've kind of focused. When we first started, we were, I really can't find a better. It's really not that bad. We were pimps, right? Anybody that had money, we sold the solution to, right? So brewery, bar, restaurant, gym, hair salon, spa, hotels, airports, you name it, right? We sold it to them. What we started doing is we started, doing data-driven decision-making. So we don't analyze our data. So we started realizing that we actually had a huge churn. Right, so churn is what percentage of people are you losing? Mm-hmm. So in the bar restaurant space, we were losing a third. That's an amazing number. Think about that. You sign up 100 customers. That means a year later, you're left with 66 of them. Of those, hopefully you've signed up another 100, so now you're at 160. Gotcha. Right, then you lose a third. Right, so now you've got 266 minus a third of the 166. Right, so and we found that that's actually very common in this industry. Right. And we went and talked to the bars and restaurants and said, hey, guys, why don't you had 500 emails before us for 5 years that you've been collecting emails, and we just gave you 15,000. And they're like, yeah, it's very powerful, but we don't know how to use it. So at that time, we're like, okay, that's interesting. So we actually started having an internal discussion about, okay, why don't we hire internal marketing and we'll have an upsell. So buy the service, monthly fee. If you don't have a marketing team and you don't know how to use it, we'll charge an additional fee to do this, right? So we're thinking about doing that. But there was a risk because until we got people to sign up and start paying, we're going to have this outlay of cost of a marketing person. But while we were having this internal discussion, we started looking at the data at the hotel side of space. And we actually saw that the hotels, we had a churn of less than 1%. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? So we went back to the hotel and we're like, okay, guys, explain something to me. Like, how are you using this data? Oh, you don't understand what a pain point this is. And we didn't really realize this. So, for me, my assumption always was, if I'm staying at a hotel, they probably have my email address because I booked online.
Right.
So, I don't know, Forte, what do you think? What percentage of their guest emails do you think they have?
All of it.
Right? That's what I thought. Adi, what do you think?
Yeah. It sounds logical to think that.
Well, guess what? If you book from Booking.com or Travelocity or Kayak, they don't share the information with the hotel.
Now that you mentioned it, that makes sense.
Because they feel that's their customer. So the hotel has, depending on what type of property, if it's an independent, if it's a flag, if it's a whatever, 5 to 18%. I mean, so it's literally around 10, so less than 10% of their guest emails. So all of a sudden, we kind of stumbled on this. Right? We didn't know this industry, but we realized all of a sudden this was a huge problem for them. Add to that the fact that they have a dedicated marketing team, they have an agency. All of a sudden, their churn's less than 1%. We're charging 5 to 10 times more than we're charging a bar and restaurant. So all of a sudden, we said, hey, this makes more sense. So ever since then, we've been focusing on hotel. So there you go. That was a huge, long, lengthy.
Yeah, that was actually very, very fascinating. Wow, I initially, when I was first reading about you, I had the thought in my head, because I know a lot of bar and restaurant owners, and I was like, how are these people, what are they doing with this data? Because none of the guys I know would have any idea what to do with data. And then you touched upon that, and I was like, oh, there you go. It makes sense.
But the ones that do, right? I mean, it's simple, and I know that a lot of Greeks have bars and restaurants, so I know they're smarter than we are with this. But here's a crazy statistic. So if you go to a bar and restaurant, it's your first time, right? What do you guys think the likelihood is on a percentage basis that you're going to go back in the next 12 months? I mean, don't think about coronavirus, right? In general, don't think about this period, right?
Well, I'd say 60%.
I mean, I'm a little different than Ari. I'm more out there more often, so I'd say probably higher than that, 75%.
Oh, hold on. Let me make sure we understand the question.
Oh.
Go into a bar or restaurant, and it's your first time going.
Right.
Oh, okay.
In that specific bar or restaurant, what percentage chance that you're going to go back again in the next 12 months?
Dropping mine then. I'm going to say 25%.
I'm going to say 50% on mine.
All right. It's actually 7%.
Wow.
Because don't forget, think about all the places. How often do you go to Greece?
Once a year? Well, once every 2 years, yeah.
So you go to all these bars and restaurants. Do you really go back? Like, you're going to go to bar? You're not going to go. So you have to, I'm talking about on an average. Right?
I got you. Yeah, that makes more sense.
But if you go to the same bar and restaurant a second time, now the likelihood of you going back a third time is 70%.
It's just,
a 10x increase. And it could be because it's near your house or near your hotel, or you know the menu, or you know where you like the waiter was cute, or he or she was cute, or you know where the toilet is, or the good park, whatever it is, right?
Right,
you feel comfortable.
Right.
So the restaurateurs that know what they're doing, they make it a point to make you happy, so you come back again. So that is either coming by to ask you how was everything, right? Maybe it's giving you a coupon for a drink on your next visit or whatever it is. So that's why the people that know how to use a solution, what they'll do is they'll get your email address and they'll send you a coupon. Here's a free appetizer on your next visit.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how you should be.
Yeah. I mean, you make it sound like simple now that you think about it. Like any business could use this and effectively get a return on their investment.
Post-COVID, we'll see.
Yeah. That's a whole different ballgame. Wow. Amazing. But we'd love to know, Foti, what were you going to ask? I want to know what he has going on now.
The journey is just so fascinating, even though I've known you for several years, just to listen play-by-play action from where you started to where you are or where you've been. It's fascinating for us to be able to even speak to you about experiences with people like Steve Jobs and a company like Apple. In our life, everything in my from a device and technology perspective, from a household to businesses, everything is Apple. To sit here and to listen to you, to me, is just like very fascinating.
I'll say, I know, in the past we've spoken about, Greeks and Greek mentality. I think something that I think is that, yes, we reminisced about it. I think sometimes us as Greeks, we have this amazing, rich, powerful history, right?
Oh yeah.
But one of my biggest cultural complaints is that we rest on that history. Εμείς κάναμε αυτό, εμείς οι απόγονοι του Μεγάλου Αλεξάνδρου, I mean, to me, that is counterproductive. Forget about the past, because you know what?
Yeah. Right.
It's about the future, right? So I'm actually, yes, there's a huge crisis, right? But I think there's a couple things that I've seen, at least in the past 5 years, that I'm excited about. I think one, the crisis did bring a huge change in Greece, right? So and I'm not talking about COVID. I'm talking about the whole troika, right? Crisis in Greece. Pre-troika, every parent and grandparent was telling their kids, "Δημόσιο, δούλεψε το δημόσιο," right? Become a teacher, become a bus driver. It doesn't matter. Work for the government, because you're going to get your guaranteed salary and guaranteed vacation and guaranteed, right? And what quickly happened was, all of a sudden, these people. This is a funny story about it. By the way, how much time do we have?
We have all the time you need.
All right, good. If this is interesting, I'll keep going, because this is a funny story. I remember έκανα Skopje, right? So I went to Cape Lamias, Κέντρο Εκπαίδευσης Λυκού Πολέμου, right? So I was in Lamia, supply, logistics, and I remember being on guard duty one, and there was a guy there, Petras, and he finished Geoponiki, okay? And I asked him, what are you gonna do when you get out of the army? He's like, I'm gonna work for the government. Okay, what do you mean? I don't care.
Whatever.
I don't care. I'm gonna work for the government. So fast forward, I see him about 2 years later, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? He's like, I'm trying to find a job at a private company. Because, like, that's a good step, right? Yeah. You're American, whatever, the companies that, Coca-Cola, Elas, or Epsilon, or whatever, right? The companies that were hiring. I'm like, that's a great change, right? Literally, I happened to see him again 6 months later. He was creating a startup. He quickly realized that those things had dried up as well. He picked up some ideas from his university, and he was going to pursue that, right? So something that did happen of the crisis. I mean, yes, there was a huge brain drain, and that sucks, right? And yes, people lost their life savings, and yes, people had to take loans, and yes, it created some catastrophes, right, in the population. But from a youth perspective, it changed the entire mentality of the new generation. So entrepreneurship did not exist.
Yeah,
a blessing in disguise.
So I got really excited about that, right? So if you fast forward and look at Greece, I mean, now you have, there was Open Fund 1 and then Open Fund 2. There's Big Pie now. There's Venture Friends. I mean, right now there are 5. Hopefully, I'm forgetting their funds, right? But there's 5 or 6 funds that are out there. Initially when the first Jeremy funds, that's what they were called. Basically, they said, hey, listen, you raise 30% of the money when you can use Europeans to give you 70%, right? So you could raise whatever, 3 million in Greece, they'll give you 7, and there's a $10 fund. There's 100 million.
Wow. And
it's gotten to the point now that all of a sudden, a lot of these newer funds don't even need that kind of support from the European. Like, there's enough money in Greece, and people are now getting it. Like, instead of putting their money in the bank and collecting 1% that's tax, they might as well put it into a fund that is going to give you hopefully a 20, 40, whatever return, right? So, of course, there's a lot of, just like anywhere in the world, 85, 9 fail, right? We can fail, right? I mean, everybody could fail. But, where these funds are making their money is the 1%, 2%, 5% that are succeeding, right? So you have somebody like a Taxi Beat that sold to Daimler Chrysler. And to me, not only am I excited for, my friends at Taxi Beat and what they did, they were able to convince, because of the engineering talent in Greece, Daimler Chrysler opened a development center in Athens.
Oh, wow. So
now you have engineers for Daimler Chrysler. Taxi Beat was owned by Daimler Chrysler, working there, right? You have Citrix, you have so many American companies that are now, because they realize there's engineering talent in Greece, right? So, we're still, several years away to maybe even a decade away from being a Tel Aviv and Israel, right? Mm-hmm. But we've definitely leapfrogged, and we've gotten really, really close to a lot of these. And there's so many success stories. And there's another nice little tie-in here since we're talking about Boston. I mean, one of the, to me, one of the largest, I guess, still from a valuation of Greek startups is a company called Workable. And they create human HR software as a service. And they actually have an office in Boston, and they have R&D in Greece, right? So that's where it makes sense, right? So R&D is, we're never going to be as inexpensive as India, right? But the skill set and the English is immensely better. And I think that is a huge, win for us. I mean, there's so many success stories if you look. I mean, Tesla's opening up a battery center, R&D. You have Google's opening up. I mean, there really is a lot of great success stories there. Unfortunately, we still have the number one input to the GDP in Greece is tourism, and COVID. I think the Minister of Education, Minister of Tourism, Theoharis, said that he will consider this season successful if we're able to reach 27% of what we did.
Oh, it's amazing.
Right? So you can imagine if the number one input to GDP is down 70%, you can see, obviously as an economy, we're going to shrink again.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot of, positives. I think not to get, hopefully, even whether or not it's this government or another government in the future or different political party, whatever, there's a lot of digitization that's happened. A year ago, you could do 5 things online. Today, you can do 50, right? So there's so much more of that. I mean, used to take you, months to submit applications. I mean, now you can get in days, right? So I really am, excited about the possibility. I think as Greeks, if we can support each other a fraction of the percent as well as the Jews, I think we're anyway. I'll get off my soapbox.
No, this is great. I mean, it's great to listen to the perspectives that you have because it really hits it home for a lot of us. Maybe we can touch on what you're working on now.
We have to have him back on. I mean, there's no way. There's too many stories that now I want to hear.
We're going to do a Christos Perakis series.
Yeah.
Right.
It'll be like, sit back with a...
Hey, hold on. I'll whet your appetite, right? Here's a sneak peek of some of the stories you'll hear next time on the Christos Perakis series. So I remember being, so I went to St. Spiridon, Agios Spiridonos in Newport Island Church. And I remember I was 16, right? So I was in high school. And I get a phone call from Father Tom Chininis at the time. And he says, and I think it was like 11 o'clock, right? And he says, Christo, what are you doing? I said, getting ready to go to bed. He goes, well, ask your mom if you can come with me. I'm like, okay, I'm sure she's going to ask where. He goes, well, a oil tanker ran aground and they need some interpreters. It's a Greek oil tanker. So I don't know if you guys knew about this. This was the World Prodigy oil tanker. Ran aground off Brenton Reef in Newport, Rhode Island, and it was a Greek crew. So they needed some interpreters. So Father Tom Chininis and I went there at 11:30 at night. The ship was listing, maybe up 20 degrees, and we actually had to climb up a rope ladder.
Oh my God.
So it's kind of funny, I mean, luckily Father Tom was wearing his black slacks. He wasn't wearing his, that would have been a little crazy wearing his robe, right? But so we were the official interpreters for the World Prodigy oil spill. There you go. There's a sneak peek.
We're gonna do like fireside chats. We're gonna have people grab a glass, a cigar, sit down. We're gonna go through these stories. We're gonna set this series up. This is the next project.
One segment opens others.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And as a tech person, I'm absolutely fascinated by everything you're saying. It's just amazing stuff. We appreciate so much that you were able to join us.
Yeah, and of course, if you guys want, I mean, honestly, I'm just a tip. I'm a small fraction of the iceberg. I mean, there's so many other Greeks and Greek Americans that are in Boston. I think we could do a really nice, fireside chat, whatever
absolutely,
a fire Skype, Zoom chat, whatever you want to call it.
We would love that.
There really are. I mean, every quarter, there's a bunch of different accelerators in Greece. And There's a bunch of mentors that are Boston-based. That it's funny that I've never, I had not met, and all of a sudden I'm doing a Skype call, training or mentoring some team in Greece, and there's another mentor that happens to be in Brookline. Like, hey, I've never met you before. And so it's really nice. And then all of a sudden, that connection happens. You realize, hey, we can help each other at different. So, but yeah, there's about 45, 50 that at least I know of that are getting some type of support from some of that's funds or it's mentorship or whatever. 2 to 5 or most of the youth that's coming out of Greece is realizing, what, some brains, some guts, and some time, you can make something of it. If you think about it, it's no different than our parents did when they came here, right?
Yeah.
Off the boat, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't have the brains, but they had the street smart, right? So street smart and hard work, and they were able to succeed.
Your approach
now you take these people and add brains into the equation, and just imagine how much more they can do than our parents and ours, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, if you even know of anybody that would,
we're gonna put
that with us, absolutely.
Yeah, I won't put them on the spot and mention them. No.
and if you ever want to join us, please, we would love to have you, do a chat and
Absolutely.
if you know of people, bring them in and we could have you with us, and that would be awesome. Let's bring that Greek community back together.
Absolutely. So Christos, I know you're going to be leaving soon to go back to Greece in a couple of days for a trip. Anything you want to share with us that you are working on at the moment? Any new projects? Anything? I don't want to say exciting because everything you're doing is exciting. So that would be an understatement. But anything you want to let us know? Just
anything new you're pimping?
Anything new? So Zoodle's my baby, right? So this is my full-time job. I'm blessed. Most of our investors are actually I take it back. All of our investors from Massachusetts.
Oh wow!
They're all Greek. So we're really blessed that we have their support. So Zoodle's definitely my baby. My part-time gig is doing as much as I can help younger generation, and quite frankly, it's some maybe 5% selfish because sometimes you hear some stuff and you go, hey, you know what? I could see synergy. I could see this. Hey, you know what? That's a different industry, but that's a nice idea. Maybe can somehow incorporate it, right?
Sure.
So you always learn, right? So the audience, I'd say, hey, if you guys can help, reach out to Footy. And there's so many young generation that needs guidance, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's distribution, whether it's legal, whatever you can do. It's only, an hour a week for 3 months, right? To be able to say that you helped the company launch, right? And they're in your debt, and I become really good friends with them. But I will speak out. I'm not pimping it myself, but a very good friend of mine has a company called Logicia, who he started about 3 years ago. I'm so excited for him. He started with 7 engineers in Greece. And basically the model was, initially it was outsourcing staff, right? Use Greek engineers to do projects here in the and he slowly picked up, more and more customers, and he picked up some, Taiwan Telecom. He picked up SpaceX as one of his customers, right? The tax authority of Dubai. And he's at the point now where he's got 65 engineers. The deal is he signs contracts here in the U.S., local project managers that then, you after they're done getting their marching orders, they call Greece and talk to the team of 5, 10, whatever people are working for them on that thing. So to me, being able to leverage the global economy, right? So the world is flat. If you guys ever read the Friedman book, The World is Flat. It's old, but brilliant still. Greece is somewhere in that line of flatness in between India, right? So, we're not as cheap. We don't want to be as cheap, right? But the skill set is higher, and you're getting those kind of success stories. So, to me, if you can help. If you've got a company and you can, use resources from companies like that are doing work in Greece that with people that have security clearance and are American citizens and that kind of stuff, And of course, if you guys don't want to invest in any company, I know of 35 companies that are looking for funds.
Excellent.
All right.
We might be knocking on your door.
All right.
But everything you said is so great for our culture, so great for, you giving back to you're a success story and you're giving back, and it's wonderful to hear that, and we appreciate that. And we appreciate that you were on our show, and thank you so much for your time.
I'm honored, guys. I thank you for creating this vehicle to share stories and hopefully bring Greeks together and closer together, because, I don't want to sound hokey, but, together, I don't want to sound like, right? But together, I think we're strong, right? We're stronger in together. Right? So,
I don't care about this podcast anymore. I'm looking forward to Fireside Chat with Christos. So that's the big one that I'm hoping
awesome.
for.
All right.
All right, Christos.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a good trip. Have a good trip and a safe trip.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.